Ugh. Ah! Hello. 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 So, this is something that I know a lot of people who use Blender were interested in when all the Unreal Engine tech demo shit came out. Like, they were very interested in using it for rendering their animations at a very high fidelity. But the documentation for getting your shit to Blender is basically fucking non-existent. People will tell you to use an FBX as if that's like a magical tool that sends everything over fine, but it's not. Like, at all. Like, it might get your animation over properly. That's a big fucking maybe. But for the most part, there's basically nothing online to tell you how to use UE5 strictly for rendering. There really isn't. So I'm gonna stream how you bring shit over to UE5, and then I'll cut it down into a short video, kind of like the Blender 2.8 video that I made, but you know, not for UE5. Yes, this is the tutorial music. It is. Yeah. So what I'm not going to teach you is I'm not going to teach you how to animate. I'm not going to teach you how to do everything you ever want in life and more. Like, I'm not going to teach you how to make a robot do this. That's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is, let's say you have a full animation. It's completely done. Everything's in place. You like the way how it looks, and now you want to render. But the problem is, if you tried to render through Cycles or Eevee, it would take a long fucking time, and your compromises would equal lower visual fidelity. And you don't want to have shitty visuals, and you don't want to render for a week, or you don't want to buy a render farm. Well, maybe with this video, I can teach you how to use UE5 as your rendering platform. Now, something that I'm gonna want you to do before even trying to do this is at least cover the basics of UE5. Like, watch one of the 4-hour tutorials that go over like the basics, because I don't want to teach you how to like open a file. I don't want to teach you how to do that. I will teach you how to use certain file types like Alembic. I will teach you that, but not like how to send an email to your grandma. I'm not going to go down to that level. So, under that pretense that I'm only teaching you how to move your shit over, I'll get started now. You should have your own commercial. I don't even know what the fuck that means. The first thing you're going to need to know is that Blender and Unreal Engine speak two different languages. Blender speaks Python. Unreal Engine speaks C++. Therefore, trying to send materials from Blender to UE is not going to work. Ever. You can download whatever plugin you want. You can use whatever file type you want. It will not work. You have to do it the manual way. And that sucks. Believe me, I know. However, if you do it in a way that is consistent and that is optimized, you wouldn't have to worry about any problems with sending your shit over. You strip your dress to teach this? Today's the day. Today's the day. This is the day where I teach people how to use UE5. This is the day. Thank you, Trenton, for the 8 months, and thank you, Laydo, for the $5. I'm glad you appreciate my content. Thank you. So, the first thing you're going to need to prepare for yourself is your Unreal Engine project. Because compiling an Unreal Engine project takes time. Getting all those shaders to compile for your project may take half an hour, may take a full hour depending upon your CPU. So very first thing, make a UE project. You can set it to be a VFX blank, where it's just like the platform and the basic post-process volume, but you're gonna want to have that established first.
Hi Neo. I'm poor but wanted to send you a little sugar to tell you how much I appreciate your content. XOXO.
Thank you, Lado. You should probably save your money if you're tight on funds. And thank you, Happy Sadbot, for the 5 months. Thank you very much. So after you've got that up and running, we're now going to talk about getting your materials over. For this high-res V1 that I stole from Unfortunate Spaceman and then upscaled via AI, I am using, I think, about 8 different materials. Oh, wow, I optimized it to 2. Okay, it's been since I've opened this project. I'm using 2 different materials for this. You'll see this right here. This is just from when I ported the model from the SFM workshop. The most important thing that I can tell you right now is do not use any other BSDF than principled. If you try to bake anything that isn't principled, you will get issues. You will get issues. The shit may look fine in Blender, but if you're using that for Blender, then don't watch this video because it won't transfer over. Stick to principled. Find a way to make it look good in principled, and if you don't like how it looks in principled in Blender, there are methods to make good looking glass or good looking whatever in Unreal Engine. But my point being, you can only use principled for baking. Now, what I recommend for baking from Blender is Simple Bake. I use this for my Fallout 4 project, and I baked over 100 different assets to UE5 with no problems. I have a couple of presets that I've made for baking shit over, but usually what you're going to need, and I'm going to load this up now, is diffuse, metallic, roughness, your normals, maybe your alpha. Normally, I don't ever have an alpha matte, so I just keep that off, and your specular. Will this VOD be available forever? I'm just scared the music in the back will get it deleted. Yeah, that'd be my fuck up, wouldn't it? I don't think it'll be bad. It should be fine. If it is bad, I'm recording this. I'll upload this without the music. Does Simple Bake have support for ARM textures? What are ARM textures? Is that a Unity thing? It can bake thickness. It can bake ambient occlusion. It can bake vertex colors and color ID. So if that's what you're talking about, then sure. But I have no clue what ARM is. I have no idea what that is. Oh, mixed channels? Yeah. You use OpenEXR. Yes, of course. You can do pack textures for that. In fact, I was just about to talk about that. Now, what you want to do whenever you bake textures is try to get them as compact as possible at a low resolution that you can get it at. So, for V1 here, I know that I'm using my diffuse. I'm using metallic, although it looks like I'm not using it for the glass here. There we go. So base color, metallic. I'm not using any specular, so if I want, I can get rid of that. Metallic, roughness, sheen, clear coat. Now, from what I remember is that you can set up clear coat with Unreal Engine and not sheen. So I'm only going to be baking for clear coat for now. If it doesn't look the same or I want to change it, I can change it later when I'm in UE, but I just want to get all the important information because this is using the same map. So I can just bake for clear coat and get both those at the same time. All right. So this will be on a basis by basis scenario where you might have certain things that you've set up with color ramps or with specific texture images to get emissive or special effects onto your character. Depending on what you have, you can cheat it just by enabling everything and baking everything and having all your maps, but you're more than likely not going to have every single node here used for your model. At least I've never had a model like that. So since I know I'm not using specular, I can uncheck my specular here, leave clear coat on. For roughness, I'm using a blank value so I can save myself time and not bake that. I'm not using transmission. I'm not using bump. I am using emission. So now that I see what I'm baking here, I'm going to not bake the character. Now here's a very important thing. You may think that you need to bake your character to get their textures. But I have more often than not struggled immensely to get the texture data from my character onto the bake into UE. So what I always do is I get a plane to bake it on, which in a sense is just creating an image texture inside Blender to bake to an image texture. And it's completely fine because really you're just baking images for a UV to extract and then put onto your model anyways. So you're going to be doing this for not only your characters, but also your set. So I have 2 materials here that I need to bake. I'm going to get 2 planes. I'm going to hide my set for now, just so I don't have to look at that. So my 2 materials are M Blood Machine and M Blood Machine Glass. It's also important at this stage, or when you're beginning, which would be way more useful for your time, to set up material names from the get-go, because that's going to be important for when you're importing in your FBXs and your ABCs. If you don't have everything streamlined in terms of how everything is authorized by names, how it transfers over via FBX or ABC, you're gonna have to do a lot of fixing when you get into Unreal Engine by manually placing in your materials rather than having everything named from the initial import and export. So I'm gonna use this for my base Blood Machine material, which has everything on it. Duplicate that, and then use this for my glass material. So now that I have both my planes here, I want to make sure that they're named properly, because this will also be the name of the textures here. So I'm going to name this to that. And I'm going to name this to this. Because when you use Simple Bake, your bakes are named after the object that they're baking from. Now, something that I'm checking for right now is if I'm using UV maps or any specific type of UV map, because your UV maps, all of your UV maps will transfer over. It's just something that you have to be aware of if you're using any sort of like specified UV map sort of a material property, because if you're using a plane, that shit disappears and you will have to think about how to overcome that. Luckily for me, I'm not dealing with that right now, but if you were dealing with UV map issues, it'll make it easier on yourself if you just bake it to separate materials. There is a way to set certain maps to use certain UV channels, but we'll talk about that later. Certain effects, like layer weight, will not bake over properly. The best way that you can check if anything will bake over properly is to just quickly go into cycles, which is path tracing, to see that it will bake over into the texture formats properly. Because when you use Simple Bake, it's baking with cycles. So I'm just gonna switch over to cycles really quick. And make sure that I'm on CUDA and not optics, because you do get baking issues with optics. So it looks like my material is doing just fine, and it's plugging into my roughness. So if I am unsure that this will do something incorrect, because layer weight is based upon information from your viewport in Blender, you can just get rid of this for now, and then you can plug in something similar to it when you get into Unreal Engine. They've got Fresnel nodes in Unreal Engine that you could like try to replace with your roughness. So now that I'm okay with how my textures look in cycles, I can go back into just this view because I already know that the materials are there. And I'm going to check my texture size, because I need to be sure that whatever size I'm baking to is appropriate for the textures that I'm using currently. Now it looks like I'm using 4K textures here. I'm going to delete this just so I make it easier for Simple Bake to not get confused. If you're using anything like normal map optimized, like it's seen right here, make sure to get rid of that, because you're not going to be using that when you bake for Simple Bake. You don't want this to be plugged in. Otherwise, if you have a normal map, you're already fine. So I'm just going to replace this real quick so I don't have any issues baking this down. If you want to try and optimize your bakes from the get-go, one thing you can try doing is simplifying the level of texture resolution with either Eevee or cycles. If you're using Eevee, you can do that by going to Edit, Preferences, I believe it's Viewport, and then Limit Size. If we go to 128, you can immediately see that our textures have gone way down. And if you're fine with this texture size, great, you're making it much easier for your VRAM in the future to cache all this shit. But if you're just using this for rendering, you don't want to optimize anyways, you could render at 8K and fuck over your computer. It's up to you. Personally, I like to try and get things at a good optimal level of fidelity to resolution. So let's see if it looks good at 2K as much as 4K. I see hardly a difference here, but let's check our model as well, because this will be our final reference. This looks like pain. It is pain, but it's even more pain when there's no documentation for it, which there isn't. So I'm trying to be helpful. I'm going to look at my model and switch back the textures from their original 4K to 2K. Now, I'd say if I was making a game, I wouldn't mind the minimal difference. But since I'm making an animation, I'm going to stick with my 4K renders. So I'm just going to up this to 4K. And I'll do this one at a time since I know these are two different properties. So I'm going to start with my blood machine texture. We're going to get the V1 model. This is the unfortunate spaceman model that I then upscaled texture-wise. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to make sure that I have every material baked down into a texture. So diffuse, metallic, roughness, normal. What I normally do for baking down my normals is I use the OpenGL setting. I've tried using DirectX and sometimes it wouldn't flip it properly, so I just bake it as OpenGL and sometimes it bakes properly for Unreal. You'll be able to check to see if the green is flipped incorrectly in Unreal just by placing a light and seeing if your texture has the highlights in the wrong direction. For me, OpenGL for some reason bakes the proper direction. I know that I want clear coat. I know that I want emission. And so now I can decide how I want all of these to be baked down into an EXR. For future reference, if you're going to bake down a great deal of textures, it'll help you in the future to have a system in place where you're baking down the same RGBA into each channel so that you can use a material instance in Unreal Engine. If you're just baking down one specific type of material that you're only going to be worried about for single use or maybe dual use cases, you can go ahead and set this to whatever you need to be as long as you keep in some sort of notation or format what each channel does. So I'm going to have that be, I scroll up way too far. Metallic, roughness, clear coat, metallic, roughness, clear coat. And then I could plug this in for emission, but I normally find that emission is better baked as an sRGB rather than its own singular channel. So you can choose whatever to do want with your alpha. You can also leave that blank if you want. I'll just put that there just in case I need the data. I'm going to label this what each channel is so that the file is named after each channel. So metallic, roughness, clear coat, and emission. Make sure it only bakes that. It's just giving me this error because it's just being weird. There we go. Now we're fine. Now, if you're using Simple Bake and you haven't used Simple Bake before, you're not baking a new UV map. You're not going to use any existing UV maps, and you're not trying to restore anything. All you want to do is bake out this texture on a normal plane because your UVs are already contained on your object. You don't have to worry about creating new UVs. You just want the textures. So I have all these selected. I'm going to add this object here. I have all my maps. I have the right resolution. I'm using alpha because I'm using this EXR here. I know where my path is. If it's 2 slashes and it says simple bakes underscore bakes, that means it'll be in your blend directory under that folder name. Keep internal images means that it's loaded into your blend file after it's done baking. And if you're fine with everything, then go ahead and start your bake. And it will begin to bake all of your textures into that folder.